Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. This is not originally what I was planning on talking about in today's video. That will be the video that comes out now tomorrow, but today we're talking about this article that was put out yesterday, the day you're getting this video. So today when I'm recording this, Wednesday, but yesterday, an article from Jacob Wolf, a report from Jacob Wolf, where he says that Overwatch League teams start collective bargaining process against League. The teams are seeking some form of economic relief after years of high operating costs and disappointing revenues. Now, I've not read through this whole article. I've skimmed through it a little bit, but these are really interesting articles, so I just wanted to kind of read through it, react to it, and give you my thoughts on what I think it may mean and what the potential future for the Overwatch League is with this article. And so let's go through and let's read it as it says. So, it says here, the majority of Overwatch League teams have retained a British law firm to start a collective bargaining process against the league after years of high operating costs and continually missed promises on revenue. The teams have hired Sheridan's, a media and technology-focused law firm with experience in both traditional sports and esports, to negotiate on their behalf with the league, sources familiar with those discussions told the Jacob Wolf report. The goal for those discussions is for the teams to be awarded some form of economic relief to promote sustainability after each franchise spent somewhere between $7.5 to $10 million in franchise payments over the past 6 years, as well as more than $1 million in operating costs each year to maintain their teams. For some teams, that means they've spent more than $16 million on a league with lackluster viewership and no profitability in sight. Negotiations between the teams, Sheridan's, and Activision-Blizzard have only begun, and tensions are high as teams evaluate how they will spend prior to the 2023 season, which begins this spring. Activision-Blizzard did not respond to a request for comment. So let's take a step back. I think this is a really interesting thing to look at, because what we're seeing is, obviously, teams have been spending a lot of money, and we knew that teams had been spending a lot of money, and that it was very expensive to get into the Overwatch League. And I think part of the problem was that when the idea was that they'd be moving to a homestand model and teams would be able to have local events where they could sell merchandise and they could sell tickets. Teams recognized that there would be at least some way for them to bring back their, some of the money they spent, right? There would be a return on investment because they get to sell tickets and whatnot at events or to events that would then help cover some of the costs for teams and all that type of stuff, right? And that return on investment isn't coming in now because we're not seeing matches played in local markets. And I think that here is the big problem that we're seeing, is that we're not getting enough local market games, and we're not seeing enough stuff that is incentivizing teams to get some of the money back. I don't know if you all recall, but there was a period in time about for I think it was 2.5, maybe even 3 full years where teams couldn't sell their own merchandise, right? Like, all of the merchandise was done through Fanatics and through the Overwatch League website, and it was all uniform across the board, so you could get a team logo t-shirt or jacket or jersey or keychain, whatever, and it was all uniform across. It wasn't until, I want to say 2021, maybe 2020, later in the year, but I want to say it wasn't until 2021 that teams actually could open up their own shops. I could be wrong. I know there were pop-up shops and stuff occasionally that could sell limited edition merch, but they couldn't run their own full-time merch store for, I want to say it was 3 years, and that's ridiculous that they couldn't sell their own merch. But that is what it is. It's unfortunate that was a thing, but that's kind of the way things are. So it makes sense why teams are looking at it and saying, we're not making any money, right? We spent all this money to get in. We're basically spending money on rosters, and we're not getting a lot of money. There's no viewership incentives, really. People aren't really watching. And we saw that go up a little bit at the end of 2022, and so hopefully going into 2023, that will be better. But there's not a ton of things driving people, and there's not a lot of monetary gain from them fielding rosters and having them play online, right? They're paying people to live, and then they're not getting any share of the money because, like I said, they're not selling tickets. They're not, having merchandise that does incredibly well locally You can't really open up a pop-up shop all the time because you don't even know what your fan base is right now. And some teams do stuff like watch parties and whatnot. I don't know how many of those are ticketed events, though. A lot of them, I think, are not, which I think is part of your problem. Let's continue on, and let's read some of the rest of this article. Discussions among the teams about taking collective action have spanned years, as many have lobbied complaints to the league since the COVID-19 pandemic fundamentally changed the league structure in 2020. But the decision to collectively organize is more recent and in part was led by Overactive Media, the ownership group behind the Toronto Defiant, sources said. Overactive have previously worked with Sheridan's on transactions related to its LEC team, Mad Lions. While operating costs for Overwatch League teams is lower than other esports leagues, such as the LCS, the Overwatch League featured the highest franchise buy-in ever. For the 12 franchises who joined before Season 1, each committed to a $20 million franchise tag to be paid over time, according to ESPN. Season 2 expansion team prices were even higher, with prices ranging from $27 to $35 million, which is something that Jacob reported on in May. So this is really important as well. Like I said, COVID definitely put a huge wrench in it, and it was the thing that killed ticket sales, killed the ability to kind of have live in-person events, which hurts as well. There was definitely some issues with merchandise and whatnot. So it's hard to build and promote a local fan base when you don't really get to have those events and get people to go. When you look at homestands like the Toronto Defiant homestands and the Dallas Fuel homestand that we've had this past year, and the events in Seoul and the couple that we had in China back in 2021, what we see is that there is a genuine appeal for people to get to go to matches, but the league itself is not providing the teams the necessary ways to make some of the money back that they've spent to buy in. And the league is kind of just coasting and basically saying, you guys don't have to pay us. You guys can pay us later. And the teams are saying, yeah, but we're not making money, so we can't pay you later anyway because we're not making any money back. So, yeah, you can tell us we can pay you later. We're just delaying the fact that in 5 years or 2 years, we're not going to have the money that we owe you because it's costing us too much money to operate and we're not making the money back. And so that's an interesting thing to look at. In 2020, as many of the teams faced COVID-related economic difficulty and took PPE loans in the U.S., Activision-Blizzard deferred the remaining balance. Activision-Blizzard later revealed the debt Activision-Blizzard later leveled the debt, reducing the balance on franchise payments down to $16 million for all 20 teams. Each team still owes somewhere between $6 to $7.5 million to Activision-Blizzard. Operating costs still remain high, and for the teams who aren't owned by major conglomerates or public companies, there's concern around how maintaining a profitless Overwatch League team will affect their bottom line and cash flow in a troublesome fundraising environment. In an interview with the Houston Chronicle on January 16th, the COO of Houston Outlaws' parent company, Beasley Esports, Lori Burgess, spoke candidly about the state of the company's revenue and losses for the Overwatch League franchise. Burgess said that the team pays some players more than $200,000 per year in salary, and despite $1.4 million in revenues stemming primarily from ad sales, the team is still operating at a loss. I didn't talk about this interview, but it is very interesting that the team is making $1.4 million and still operating at a loss. Right, and I think $200,000 is a lot of money, obviously, and I think that speaks somewhat to the relatively high contract costs for players. It's the type of issue where players should get paid the money that they are owed, but also the problem you run into is a lot of these teams don't have that kind of money all the time. And so we're seeing a disparity where some teams just have more money to throw around than others do. And that's a huge problem. And I think ad revenue is a big part of it, right? Houston Outlaws have a huge ad deal with HEB, which helps them a lot. They get a lot of money from that. And they're still operating at a loss. They brought in $1.4 million in revenue, and they're still operating at a loss. They had a home event, right? But presumably you also have to pay the operating costs for that. You have to pay staff, all that type of stuff. So there are ticket sales, but I don't know how much the ticket sales offset the cost it would have been just to operate that event. We'll see how that kind of happens. But we're seeing that the teams don't have the money necessarily because they're not making money back from the Overwatch League. And so it is a problem, and it's something that I think there are definitely solutions for. It's just a matter of whether or not the league actually does anything with some of those. Moving on, it says revenue share from the league is also at an all-time low as the league displays 0 sponsors on its website and has not signed a major media rights deal since the expiration of its agreement with YouTube this fall. I know the Call of Duty League is on Twitch right now. I don't think it has a broadcast deal, though, so I don't really know how that's going on. The league lost many of its sponsors in July and August of 2021 after a California Civil Rights Division lawsuit against parent company Activision-Blizzard that alleged systemic sexual harassment and gender discrimination within the company. As a result, brands like Coca-Cola, Kellogg's, Cheez-It, and Pringles, State Farm, and T-Mobile paused or terminated their deals with the league in wake of the news, according to the Washington Post. It also lost Xfinity, whose sister company, Comcast Spectator, owns the Soul Infernal, formerly known as Philadelphia Fusion, in between the 2021 and 2022 season. So obviously, not all of it is entirely the Overwatch League's fault. I think you can tell that the teams are not angry with necessarily the Overwatch League itself. I think there are some reasons to be mad at them, but they are also mad at the Activision-Blizzard, the parent company, because they basically have screwed over all these teams, and they've led them on basically saying, hey, we're going to get you your money, and then they haven't gotten the money. And they're like, where is the money that we were promised, right? Because they know they're going to pay it back to them. But they were like, you promised us we would be able to make money, and we're not. So this is fun. This is a whole fun situation. Closing it out here, we have more broadly, esports is going through what some, including Overwatch League team executives, have called the esports winter, as esports teams enter mid to late stage in their fundraising cycles. Many are struggling to find venture or private equity financing to stay afloat, leading to mass layoffs and significant scaling back on spending to reduce burn. Advertiser dollars are also shrinking as brands question to the value of spending on esports amid low conversion to their products from esports-centric ad campaigns. The franchise leagues, including the Overwatch League, its sister Call of Duty League, and the LCS and LEC, are a key focus in this downturn given promises made by publishers Activision-Blizzard and Riot Games from 2016 to 2018. Quote, they certainly pitched us that the growth of these leagues would be meteoric, and we all drank the Kool-Aid, end quote, from Misfits Gaming CEO Ben Spunt, whose organization owns the Overwatch League's Florida Mayhem and Call of Duty League's Florida Mutineers. He told that to the New York Times in November, closing out saying, quote, what has happened is that growth has not materialized as fast as we had hoped, end quote. So if you want to look at this article, like I said, I'll link it in the description. I think it's really interesting, and it tells a lot of the biggest problems for the league that we all kind of knew. It's been very transparent. The league does not get great viewership numbers, which is a huge problem. And the league also has seemingly struggled with finances and economics for a while because they don't really have the sponsors right now. We talked about them losing sponsors back in 2021. That was a very, very, very bad thing that this league lost a bunch of its sponsors, because without sponsors, you don't have people that can help you offset some of those costs. And that's a big problem. They operated the entirety of 2022 and basically the last quarter or third or whatever of 2021 with zero sponsors. They didn't get a sponsor until Butterfinger became a sponsor again in the playoffs this past year. Now, I think it's very possible that some of those sponsors do return with time. Overwatch 2's release, I think, could help alleviate some of those issues. I think that's why Butterfinger sponsored them, because they realized the game was out. Viewership was getting higher, and so they kind of jumped on. I don't know if you remember, that happened in the middle of the playoffs. It didn't happen at the beginning. It literally happened in the very middle of the playoffs. It'd already been going on for a day or two before Butterfinger ads started showing up. So I think there is potential for ad sales to come back up and ad revenue to get back up. But like Jacob Wolf talked about here, towards the bottom, right? Advertising dollars are shrinking as brands question the value of spending on esports amid low conversion to their products from esports-centric ad campaigns. The problem with esports is that a lot of the audience of esports are young people, and a lot of young people don't have money right now. And so I think that's part of the problem, is that there are just a lot of young people who don't like ads, and who, as a result of not liking ads, don't usually buy things from ads, and also don't have a lot of money in general. The economy is not in a great place right now. The article touches on it right now, but especially in the U.S. in particular, but around the world as well, the economy is not in a great place. Layoffs are happening in mass. He talks about it here with some of the esports organizations, but also it was news that Microsoft laid off like 10,000 employees, and I think it was 343 that had a bunch of layoffs, which is a part of Microsoft, obviously. So we're seeing that there are layoffs, and we're seeing companies that are having these big layoffs, and there's all these announcements. So the economy is not in a great place right now. I know people who are affected by layoffs, and so it is very difficult to really look at the situation right now and think, yeah, there's a lot of promise for the Overwatch League. I think one of the things that really needs to happen, I think the Overwatch League needs to just accept the fact that these teams need to find other ways to make money, and I think they need to allow teams to do more things outside of just the league itself. I think part of the problem is operating costs are relatively high, and I think part of why they're high is because they're basically paying all of this money over a 6-year period or whatever, and then they're not doing anything in return for the other 6 months of the year, right? And so they're paying for these players they're signing these players their contracts in January and December and February, and then they're not playing games until March, April. And so there's like a several-month period where they have players who are under contract and they're not bringing in any money, And so I think the league needs to do better about expanding the thing. I think that the idea that teams shouldn't be allowed to compete in other things, the league needs to open up a lot of things with Overwatch League teams. They need to run other tournaments. They need to run like mini seasons or just make the seasons longer and put longer breaks during the season. A more traditional esports format where it's like you have, like the summer split or the spring split like you have in League. So you do the spring split, summer split, and then Worlds at the end of the year, right? You give more time for the players to actually be able to do things. And I think you have to embrace home markets more. I think you have to have more ability for teams to make money that way. But the reality is teams need to have other methods to make money outside of just league sponsorships and a broadcasting deal. I think that the league needs to eliminate some of that just exclusivity of they can basically only play in our tournaments, right? The problem is there's not a lot of money to go around in the esports scene, and in the Overwatch esports scene in particular. So teams will struggle a bit, and it's really rough to see. So I'm hoping that we get to a period where the money is able to come back, but right now it's just not a great spending time. The Overwatch League is not the NFL, right? Where the NFL brings in, billions of viewers every season, and these teams, every NFL franchise is owned by like a mega billionaire who has so much money, and the entire league operates at such a high level, right? That they can have, down years and they're still making a lot of money because the eyes are on the product. That's not really the case here, and online ad sales and stuff are a lot different, and I think there's just a very different style. So I think the Overwatch League does need to make some changes. I honestly think that part of losing the All Access Pass that didn't necessarily sink in for a lot of people is just that the fact that when people bought the All Access Pass, that was money going towards the Overwatch League, which with revenue sharing would also go to the teams. So I think the Overwatch League needs to find ways to just monetize the brand more, which is hard because in order to monetize it, obviously you need people to buy. But if they can find ways to engage with the viewers and whatnot to make them buy into the thing more, to buy more products, or at least to buy something that enhances their viewing experience or something like that, I think that could help, because I'd buy the All Access Pass for $15 again if they brought it back. I love the Overwatch League. I think the All Access Pass was cool. I only used it a couple times because I didn't buy it before, but I would totally buy it now if that was something they brought back. So I think they need to look at just other ways to monetize the Overwatch League in order to help expand the brand, right? I'm not an economist. I don't know a lot about the economy and economics. It's not my strong suit, but that to me screams what they need to do. They really need to figure out how to go about getting a lot of this economic stuff in a place where fans have things that they can buy and feel incentivized to buy, which then helps the league. I think the biggest thing is really you need sponsors. I think a viewership deal is tough at this point in time because I don't think YouTube or Twitch is going to really buy into a deal like that. You think back in the past, they had Twitch and ESPN, so they had a ton of money coming in from both Disney and Amazon, and then they just went Google, and so there definitely has been a drop to that. So we'll see where this goes. I'll be curious to see where the story goes, and see if there is a new deal struck or anything like that. But it is interesting to see what happens, and I'm curious to see if the league survives much longer. It is quite scary when we live as the Overwatch League to see that the league might not last for much longer, but we'll see what happens as we get a little bit closer. But that's going to be it for me for today. Let me know in the comments down below your thoughts on the story. you have any additional things you wanted to add to it than what I brought up, then I would love to hear from you, and post that down below. And if you want more videos like this in the future, consider liking and subscribing. Your support does help the channel out a bunch. But that is going to be all from me for today. Hope you all enjoyed. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.